participating, but I see I have a message, or at least someone from Bighorn County tried to contact me this morning, and they were one of the outliers. So I think before we pull the trigger on the DocuSign resolution, I better find out what's happening in Bighorn County. So that might set us back slightly, but still we're on track to execute the resolution in December at the latest, since we have got to get the current sitting commissioners who adopted this thing to actually sign it. So more on that to follow. Stay tuned.
Wait, and Powell signed yesterday, or?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Powell adopted the joint resolution yesterday. So with the exception of Anaconda Deer Lodge County, we now have just about every other county in western Montana. Of course, Lewis and Clark is still an outlier, but they'll come around eventually. So any other public comment on items not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, let's just roll right in. Our first item is from our very own Andrew Charney. We have a final resolution for the sale of a little over $12.4 million principal amount of the Fairgrounds District Special Assessment Revenue Bonds. Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Dave. I'm happy to report this morning we had a very successful sale the day after Veterans Day last week. We did our preliminary pricing on Tuesday and went out into the marketplace on Thursday morning. It was unbelievable. We just hit it right. We in the previous 3 weeks, there'd been about $20 to $30 billion worth of paper that came into the marketplace. So we were a little bit concerned that the buyers might be weary. Everybody was trying to push their paper out before the election. And the week we went out, there was only between $2 and $4 billion worth of paper available. So the buyers were hungry and there wasn't any other Montana paper out there. So they were aggressively bidding on our deal, and we priced it very aggressively. So in each category, each maturity, we had almost exactly one-time sales. That is, the amount sold for sale was sold. Sometimes there was a little oversubscription, but it was unbelievable. Throughout the whole 50 years, it was almost exact. So that tells me that we priced it right. On the front end, at the end of the day, we had $990,000 worth of bonds that were unsold. $660,000 of those bonds were in the 2050 maturity. Bank of America just took those into their inventory. There's about $330,000 on the front end that was in between years 22 to 28. And we did some adjustments there on the front end. We adjusted it 0.05%. So it went from a, this is ridiculous. And for the 2022s, it had been priced at a point. We 0 and were able to sell it. We bumped up the 2023's 0.05 to 0.44 and we're able to sell it. We went up 0.03, 0.02, and then 0.01, 0.01 in the 2028, 2027s. So that what the net effect of that was that we didn't get about $800 in additional premium, and it had no effect on our debt service. So we hit a home run. It was an all-in true interest cost of 3.14% over the 50 or the 30 years of the bonds. Normally we sold only 20-year bonds, but with this Fairgrounds Special District, we went ahead and sold 30-year bonds. We were able to do that, extend the maturities. So I couldn't have been more pleased. We use $6,318,598 to repay the ban. That's a bond anticipation note that we had with First Security Bank that covered some of the initial expenses before we were able to get to market. And the remaining $9 million will go into the Fairgrounds construction account to complete phase 1 of the Fairgrounds reconstruction project. I think about all I had. Any questions, or did I make that clear as mud, or?
Some impressive crystal ball reading. Nice job. Just sounds lucky.
Well, the bankers accused me of dragging my feet until rates came down, and then we went to market. So it just worked out very well. Chris was on the final pricing call and heard what the bankers had to say and agreed with me to accept it. And we brought it to Josh, who then signed it. And today we're asking for you to adopt the resolution setting the parameters of the sale. And we'll have the money next week.
Great.
Well, I move to adopt.
I will second that. Any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Glad to feed those hungry buyers, Andrew. So,
All right. Thank you.
Good work.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item comes to us by way of Gary Elliott. If you're on the line, this is a request to approve a contract amendment for the Missoula Assessment and Sanctions. Or anyone from the sheriff's office. Jason.
Yep. In lieu of Gary going, this is DOC catching up with per diem rates. It's kind of a yearly thing that happens where we do our calculations. I see that it is 3 years behind, so we're actually approving 2017, but this is fairly normal for us and the process DOC has in place. So this is a good thing to get us caught up for that 2017 year. We anticipate about 500,000 to come across after this is finalized.
Jason, does this rate actually reflect our real costs?
It reflects the cost based on the formula that we're provided to make this calculation. So yes, I mean, in the way we agreed to do it, it does, but that's for 2017 and then things changed after that.
Anna, how does this relate to or not any of our other current wranglings with DOC? You're muted, Anna.
I hate being that person. For the current litigation that we have with DOC, we are seeking reimbursement for fiscal year 2017, 18, 19, and onward for MASC. So this will address the damages that we have alleged for 2017, but it will not address the damages for MASC that we've alleged for 18 and 19. It also doesn't address the damages that we've alleged going back to 2015 for the county side of the detention center as opposed to the MASC facility.
So would this need to, given this, would we need to amend our complaint to reflect that we are actually getting reimbursed for 2017?
No, we saw this coming, so we drafted our complaint in a way that was that did reflect that we saw that we were going to be getting to a negotiation for this fiscal year.
I would expect nothing less from an astute Missoula County attorney. So
She's on top of it.
well, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I'm all in favor of getting everything that's deservedly coming our way. So.
Second.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Oh, that was just commentary, but I'll consider that a motion. No, what the heck? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Was there any public comment on that, by the way? Okay. Seeing none. We thanks, Jason, and
Yep.
Lisa Beskevich. What do you have for us?
Good morning, everyone. I am filling in for Cindy Farr this morning to deliver a contract around the HIP grant that we get from DPHHS. And this is a continuation grant to provide early intervention services around HIV testing, treatment in our community with our community partners at PHC, Open Aid Alliance, All Nations Health Center, and the Gay Men's Task Force. So it's just really pivoting within COVID to make sure we're reaching vulnerable populations, that they're getting served for HIV prevention and treatment, or intervention and treatment services. And it's a contract, and here we go.
Thanks.
And we'll all be wearing masks.
Great. I move that the chair set page 6 and initial page 1. And is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
I will second that. Any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Lisa. And my hat's off to all of you guys at the health department. We get so many of these contracts and contract amendments. You guys do a great job of keeping all of this straight on the back end. So,
Well,
thanks.
thank you very much. We appreciate all the grants that come to us to be able to provide service to our community. So it's good.
Okay.
All right. Have a
Keep up
great
the
day,
work.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Adrienne, we are looking at a request to authorize the chair to sign a FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program Agreement.
Right, so what you have before you is a long-awaited grant award that we applied for following the 2017 wildfire season. So for a little bit of back history here, when we have large-scale wildfires that are threatening communities or infrastructure, we are eligible for what they call an FMAG, which is a Fire Management Assistance Grant. Essentially, that grant comes to the state of Montana, not to Missoula County specifically, but when we have an FMAG declared in our county, that automatically makes a pot of money available for what they call post-fire mitigation through the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program administered by FEMA. And for every FMAG that is issued, it equates to about $420,000 worth of grant money for fuel mitigation or for hazard mitigation. In this case, following the 2017 wildfire season, we had 3 FMAG declarations in Missoula County, one for the Rice Ridge Fire, one for the Lolo Peak Fire, and one for the Liberty Fire. And so we applied for the full amount of what we believed we could get and what we could spend. So the total ends up being close to about $1.2 million. We proposed our grant application in 2 phases for what was eligible for an activity. So the first phase is really doing a lot of the fuel mitigation work within that home ignition zone. So if you think of it within about 300 feet of a structure on private property, this funding will enable us to provide 75% of the costs associated with doing that work, with the homeowner providing that 25%, typically in cash, but they can do that in voluntary labor. So it's a great program that is really built on a model of what we've been doing in Missoula County with other federal funding sources for over 20 years. So we're excited to get this. It's a 3-year grant program. The $876,906.89 is inclusive of phase 1, which is that work I just described, but it also is inclusive of another eligible project, which enables us to look at larger tracts of private property that may be receptive to fuel treatments in those areas. And those areas have to be within 2 miles of a structure. And so in phase 1, we will be looking at opportunities to leverage multiple property owners to perhaps participate in that project. So phase 1 is doing the work in the home ignition zone, and then trying to identify some of these other properties that might be good opportunities to utilize grant funding in phase 2. Phase 1 also incorporates the necessary review. If you think of what we know the federal government has to go through when they have large scale projects in the NEPA process, FEMA has a much smaller, more nimble process, but we still have to have those parcels evaluated prior to any work being conducted.
Adrienne, so phase 2, can that also include additional home ignition zone work, or
not as it's currently written? But phase 1 will span the entire 3-year period. Phase 2 would just be implemented in that 3rd year of the 3-year period of performance.
Within
And
phase one. Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Keep
I
going,
was just gonna say it should be no surprise. I'm somewhat dubious of some of the mitigation work that gets done far outside of the home ignition zone, and the efficacy of that work and actually delivering on the desired results. So I guess we'll see how the analysis goes. It's one thing if it's landscape scale restoration and looked at from an ecological standpoint. There's more dots that need to be probably connected that work 2 miles out is actually going to deliver on the results related to public safety. So.
Yeah, and I totally agree and understand. You know, oftentimes even amongst federal agencies, there is a wide discrepancy in what is effective and what is not effective. And for example, FEMA, we cannot utilize any FEMA funding to burn at all. Even the slash that is created in the home ignition zone work, we are expressly prohibited from burning the material. And so
That's not considered a treatment.
No,
That's certainly not a complete treatment.
An hour about that, yeah, and we've pushed kind of review of that policy all the way up to Washington and not really received any result from that. And so we're forced into a situation where we have to chip the debris that is created as a result of these fuel mitigation projects, and that adds a lot of complexity as far as just our ability to do a lot of work, because chipping just adds another crew that has to be implemented to deal with that debris, and just broadcasting it back onto the ground is not necessarily a good result either. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of bureaucracy that we have to wade through in order to utilize these funds.
Adrian, could you do me a favor and shoot me whatever language that FEMA is drawing upon to limit our ability to burn? And I don't know if that's in the contractual language or somewhere else, but I will be meeting with John Tester's natural resource staffer here in the next couple of weeks, and perhaps there's an opportunity in the period of time over this grant time frame to take a different approach at adjusting FEMA's thinking on such things. So
sure, and I'm all for that and would be happy to support that. You know, managing expectations. We applied for this grant in early of 2018, and we are just now getting funding because it just wading through the layers of FEMA sometimes takes a really long time, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try.
No, thanks for sticking it out and snagging another pot of money for us.
Well, I motion to approve the chair to sign the FEMA agreement articles to accept the mitigation grant program.
I'll second that. Further discussion on the motion. All in favor?
Aye. And I did just have a quick question. So none of this funding can be used for what you're talking about within phase one, the home ignition zone. It's not for addressing the structure itself. It's all just fuel.
It's all about the vegetation, correct? And you know, addressing the structures is an eligible activity. It's one that we chose not to go with in this particular grant application. Doesn't mean that we couldn't go for another one at some point in the future. The requirements around that are pretty tight, and not to belabor this, and we can certainly have another meeting to discuss kind of what is available, what the options are. But in order to receive one of these grants, we have to present a project that is what they call cost effective, and we have to go through a predetermined what they call benefit cost analysis. And that, when we talk about structural retrofits, it means that we have to have all of those projects kind of pre-identified, and the scale and scope and the work that would go into kind of getting all those homeowners on board, having quotes for the work that needs to be done. The timing is just challenging sometimes.
Got it.
Very good. Thanks, Adrian.
You bet.
Next, we have Kristen Jordan. We have a request to authorize the chair to sign an affirmation letter for application to DOJ's National Institute of Corrections to request technical assistance in the form of a consultant for the CJCC's pretrial research project. Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick background, the CJCC did go through a strategic planning operation or exercise earlier this year, and they identified 2 key priorities. One of them was the mobile crisis team, which just kicked off this week, and I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to the Missoula Current for a great article that they published about it yesterday. It's already making a big difference in the community. But the other one that they identified was a pretrial research project, and we have access to a consultant from the, oops, oh, here go the doggy doorbells, perfect timing. The Department of Justice has a pretrial executive network. Buddy, stop. It's the trash man, and he's letting me know the trash man is here. Sorry. And so they have a pretrial executive network where they have consultants who are trained to help jurisdictions evaluate their pretrial services. And we just need to submit an application letter, and the affirmation letter is to guarantee that the contents of our application are valid and accurate. And so this has been through several levels of scrutiny, and I think that we have a good application to put forward, and we just need to have the chair sign the letter saying that it is an accurate application.
That's good, because most of our applications are usually invalid and very sloppy. So
you got to do the affirmation letter.
I motion that the chair sign the affirmation letter application.
I will second that. Further discussion on this hotly controversial item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks,
Great.
Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay, Eric Dixon, we have a request to authorize the chair to sign a categorical exclusion document for the Mullen Build Grant.
Yes, thank you. So as everyone knows, in November of 19, we were awarded a build grant for the development of infrastructure in the area west of Reserve Street and between Broadway and Mullen Road. And you know, as a federally funded project, there are environmental documentation requirements that need to be met. And our consultant DJ&A with their subconsultant HDR has completed the environmental documentation that was required by the Federal Highway Administration and the Montana Department of Transportation in the form of categorical exclusion. And I know that when you see a project of this size and, you know, original estimates in the $20 million range, there's probably a question of how categorical exclusion is applicable for this project. But you know, it meets the requirements of the Federal Highway Administration as the funding agency, and you know, the 16-page document that is the final product is not a standalone document. There's I totaled it up a little while ago, and there's 556 pages of support documentation that address every issue that is required of the environmental documentation. So the you know, again, the CADX looks like maybe a questionable level of work in this area, but it meets all the requirements that were given to us, and our consultants are quite qualified in doing that work, and we would recommend that the categorical exclusion be signed.
Thanks, Eric. Any questions on this?
Nope. Where are we? A motion to approve the chair sign the categorical exclusion documentation. This is for the entire project, right? Or
Yes.
Eric, okay.
I will second that, and I'll just say I'm a frequent critic of categorical exclusions as the proper level of analysis for very large federal undertakings, but in this case, this seems warranted. Any further discussion on the item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Eric, another build-related item.
Yes, so within that project area, one of the major pieces that has been missing for some time is that north-south connection of England Boulevard and the east-west connection of O'Leary Street. And those two parcels are owned by the Flynn family, and even though they're in the city, you know, as essentially a county-sponsored project, this is part of our duty to take care of. But you know, being city property currently, the city of Missoula did all the negotiations with the Flynn family for whatever requirements they each asked of each other for the future development of this property. So you know, we didn't. I don't think we have a lot of input or criticism for what the city worked out to their best benefit and for the best benefit of the Flynn family. So this is a first step in securing the necessary right-of-way for two major connectors in this area, and would recommend that the letter be signed, and then future right-of-way agreements will follow.
That was my next question, Eric. Since this is a letter of intent, what would those next steps, formal steps be? The actual right-of-way documentation?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then, well, I motion to approve the letter of intent.
I will second that. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Chris, you bring before us today PSA with Phoenix Protective Services.
Good morning. So this is a professional services agreement with Phoenix Protective Services out of Spokane, Washington. The county conducted a request for proposals process to secure security services for the courthouse and potentially the new library building for a term of 3 years with optional extension for up to 5 years. During that RFP process, we did really only receive one fully responsive proposal and one partial responsive proposal to the request for proposals. That process requires that it be published in the Missoulian, and we also sent it out to some folks locally, but did only get one full response and then one partial response when we did that project. I do feel like the information that we got back in the complete proposals was very thorough. Phoenix took the opportunity to come over to Missoula, review our courthouse, walk through the building, you know, kind of really got to know and understand the needs that we have for the courthouse as we move, not only for today, but as we move towards the future. As part of that process, they also met with the library to kind of understand their needs in the new space once they're able to open, and some of the COVID issues have been mitigated. So they did have a very responsive proposal, did have it looked at by both the Sheriff's Department, some of the staff here, Erica and others. The cost of this contract actually is billed basically on an hourly rate for either armed or unarmed security. And we did get both prices, just depending on where the county moves in the future, but also the library was interested in both pricing models, not knowing whether they were going to go with either armed or unarmed security. So we did secure services for both of those two options. Phoenix will provide 2 security officers in the courthouse. One will be stationed at the security desk that will be installed on the main floor of the historic section of the courthouse between the 2 justice court courtrooms. And that person will be responsible for monitoring the security cameras and features in the courthouse. And then they'll have 1 roving staff member throughout the building, kind of moving between the courtroom areas, clerk and recorder, treasurer's office, and clerk of district court throughout the day. We do provide them with radios as part of this contract that allow them to speak directly to the sheriff's office, as those are usually the responders when we have a panic alarm or we have a situation inside the courthouse. So they have that ability to directly communicate with them as well. They're also, with this contract, able to cover the lawn area where we've had some issues around security and As you know, we've experienced an uptick because the Poverello Center is not able to offer the level of services, and so they've been doing a great job. Again, just working really compassionately and caringly with those individuals to help just make sure that the security around the building gets maintained. They started this Monday, so the contract is a little bit behind that, the curve for when they actually started. Last thing I want to say about it is the rate that we got for this, I do feel is fairly competitive. We did have Black Knight Security providing the service for us before. This contract does start lower than what we were paying Black Knight, and even at year 5 ends for unarmed security at roughly the same rate we were paying to our previous provider. So I feel like we've kind of crossed all the I's and dotted the T's. I do know there were some questions from a member of the public, and Dave Wall's on the line. I don't know, Dave, if you want to add anything about the process. I know it's always better when we get more responses, but we also aren't able to control the number that we get. So,
yeah, Dave, if you wanted to elaborate a little on the procurement process and what your thoughts are in a case like this where we only got one fully and one partially responsive proposal.
Sure thing. This is the most formal procurement. We did do a request for proposal, an RFP, and so we sent a legal ad to the Missoulian, our paper of record. They have the contract for publishing our legal ads. It has to be published for 2 consecutive Sundays, and that's per state statute. And then it's posted on our website. There are several national organizations, kind of procurement sites that companies can kind of contract with, get a subscription to, that they sort of scour the country, governmental websites for RFPs, and they often pick ours up. They pick all of ours up. So it's just a question of whether or not, for example, a private security firm who would utilize one of those companies to kind of get matched up with government contracts, which is fairly common. Locally, there's always it's always a bit of a trick to try and just make sure everyone locally knows that we have RFPs out. You know, we do put it in the paper. It is on the website. I'm thinking, since we send a legal ad to the paper anyway, I'm thinking of trying to utilize maybe social media a little bit more, kind of the same legal ad type format, but maybe putting it out through social media so we get maybe a little bit more local action on those. However, the RFP usually gets the most response because we're not specifically going to different companies and asking them to respond. We're sending out an RFP out to the world and saying, if you could help us with this situation, please send us a proposal. And so then it's just up to contractors to send them in.
Yeah, seems like a classic case of you can lead the horse to water, or the RFP to a potential vendor, but you cannot necessarily make them drink or submit a proposal on it. Chris, were you going to say something else?
I did want to add one other thing. Phoenix Protective Services does provide service here already in Missoula, even though they are a Spokane company. They have the contract for the federal courthouse located basically, in the 200 East block of West Broadway instead of the West block of Broadway.
Juanita, did you have a question?
No, I was just, that's good to know. Yeah.
Hey, one more question, Chris. So some folks out there might ask, why not just use our sheriff's office, sheriff's deputies to fill this role, as opposed to going out for contract for additional security support?
Sure, that's a great question, Dave. So we actually are looking at this as kind of a layered approach to security in the courthouse. And so the private security will be kind of the last layer, although they might be the first one that folks encounter. So coming into the courthouse, we really want to have that security presence, but we also want to have folks who can help direct folks throughout the courthouse and help them to locate areas. So this level of security seemed appropriate for that. In the courtrooms, if we have an in-custody inmate, we have another level of security where we have officers who have that kind of responsibility directly related to the prisoner or the person defendant who's in custody around that. And then we do use the sheriff's department in certain circumstances profile cases or areas where we know that we're going to have people who need to be taken into custody, because that's the appropriate role for the deputy sheriff. So really what we tried to do was kind of striate out the level of need that we had in each given circumstance and find the balance for that. And we did that working really closely with the sheriff's office and going through the building and determining exactly where each one of those assets would be appropriate for it. And really this piece seemed most appropriate in that private security world.
Great, thanks.
Yep, and thanks, Wall, as well. So I'm gonna motion to approve the professional service agreement with Phoenix Protective Services.
I will second that. Any further discussion or public comment on this? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Chris, and
Thank you.
County Auditor Wall.
Thank you.
All right, Sarah Bell, we have a planning board item before us today.
Good morning, commissioners. This is a pretty basic appointment. So on the Missoula Consolidated Planning Board, we had a resignation from Peter Benson, which is effective November 2nd. And so with the planning board, one of the qualifications is that the members live in specific areas, either in city limits or county limits. And so Peter served as a county member outside of the city limits, and our alternate that we have on the board right now is Dave Loomis, who also fits that same address qualification, and he's been serving since earlier this spring. He's been on the board, and he is willing to step up to fill the regular member seat. And so I spoke with the staff, Donna, over at CAPS, and she suggested that Dave be moved up. He's been an excellent addition to the board. And so the request before you today is to move Dave up into Peter's regular member seat. And this board is also currently open to applications. And so the thought is that the new applicants that we have coming in would fill this alternate position if they were so qualified.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks, Dave Loomis. So I move to have Dave Loomis fill the remainder of the vacant term.
Perfect.
Well said. I will second that. Any further discussion on this? Also very controversial item. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, another crowd pleaser coming up here. Annie Cathy, we are looking at approving holiday office an office closure memorandum.
Yep, this is something we do yearly for Thanksgiving and Christmas for offices that aren't required to be open by law on the day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve if it's applicable. This is for the day after Thanksgiving, and we'll revisit in December. So it is prepared and just something that we do each year to make our legal obligations.
Okay. So controversial. I move to approve a holiday office closure memorandum for November 27th.
Excellent. I will second that. Further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and our next two items, let's just take these together, 11 and 12. These are both standard employment agreements for folks over at Partnership Health Center. Anything to add to this, Chris, other than what we see here?
No, these are our standard employment agreements with all the usual terms and conditions that we have in those for partnership. It looks like for a clinic manager and a dentist, as I recall. So I think these are well in order.
We met them yesterday, right? Or we met Jennifer Means yesterday.
I believe so, yeah. She's one of our newer ones.
Said hello to her. Okay. Yep, I motion to approve the employment agreements, or items 11 and 12.
I will second that. Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Hey, thank you. Moving on to correspondence, we have a letter to be transmitted to the Secretary of State appointing a replacement for Senate District 48. This was Senator Nate McConnell's seat, and we appointed Representative Shane Morgeau to fill this seat earlier in the week. Chris, anything to add here?
No, this is just the formal letter of appointment that has been sent off to the Secretary of State. So we just wanted to make sure we noticed that, even though you held your public meeting and that was well noticed, and opportunities for public comment. This is just to meet that notice requirement about the formal correspondence on that commissioner action.
Good.
Great.
All right. As far as discussion items, anything relative to?
Sorry, Dave, can I stop you real quick?
You certainly can.
Thanks. For the correspondence, we also had that letter from Chet that mistakenly got left off the agenda. So the letter to the mayor and city council in support of the new trail plan downtown. So it's a letter in support of the city council's resolution that will be before the council next Tuesday, November 23rd. So it's the resolution is to adopt the North Riverside Parks and Trails plan for Caras, East Caras, Best Reed, Downtown Lyons, and Kiwanis Park, Ron's River Trail, and everything that involves. And Dave, I believe you served on that board or the committee.
Yeah,
the
I did serve on the Blue Ribbon Committee related to that planning process. Yeah, it's a great and very grand vision for our riverfront parks and trail system in the heart of Missoula, and I think it will be it's going to be a multi-year process to fund and implement, but I think it's going to be a great complement to the work for the downtown master plan that's already been completed. So we'll be seeing this.
The letter will be in,
I'm sorry.
The letter will be in the packet for you to sign today, but it will be actually published on the agenda next Tuesday. So.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you, and thanks for writing the letter.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Any other correspondence that we need to discuss or that we've received? Okay. How about anything related to upcoming meetings? Communications.
Hi, commissioners. I don't have anything I need from you, but I just wanted to let you know that we are putting out some messaging regarding a misconception that the courthouse is closed entirely to the public. So we're going to be sending out just a short message to the media and doing some social media on that, but just so you know that.
That is effective.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, we're talking over each other here. Allison or Chris, when is that effective? Immediately?
The courthouse being open?
Open or closed? What did you say? Oh, open. I thought you said it was
it's
closed.
Open, but we've had some misleading headlines, I think, just out there.
Okay.
So they're getting calls over that people think it's closed. Just
okay.
Nobody can go in the building, but.
Thanks. I misunderstood. I thought that it was
closed.
I thought it was closed. So.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No. That's what we're trying to correct. Sorry, I may have misspoke too. Who knows?
Good to know, because it was still open as of last night.
Yes.
Yes. You're talking. So. Okay. Thanks, Allison.
Okay.
We'll look forward to that.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, anything COVID related that anyone wants to hit on? Adrian or Chris?
I'll just provide a brief update in that we are continuing to work with FEMA for eligible activities out of the Office of Emergency Management related to our COVID response, most specifically non-congregate shelter. As of this morning, we have served over 100, well, not over, we've served exactly 170 unique individuals with non-congregate shelters since March. We continue to see heavy utilization of the site for its intended purpose, so that's all good. But it's several times in the last week we have reached capacity, and so we are currently in the process right now of looking what our surge capacity and surge planning is going into the winter.
Does any other county in the state of Montana have a non-congregate shelter? Are we at?
No, yes, there are. So we were probably one of the first to stand up the non-congregate shelter as it exists today in Missoula County, and we're starting to see some of the larger jurisdictions move in the same direction that we did right now. And so Cascade County, we've been working with them as they've been attempting to build a model very similar to what we're doing. Billings has a it's couched under a non-congregate shelter, but it actually is a congregate isolation shelter, is my understanding of what they've done. Butte Silverbow has a very small non-congregate shelter operation that they're running, and then Gallatin County has a partnership with their HRC that has a quasi non-congregate shelter operation running as well.
Was there was some question when we had the MACO, or it was the all urban county meeting, where are those the counties that you just mentioned, are they also applying for FEMA funding with their non-congregate shelters too, or
yes.
Is that a different program? Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah. There have been so Lewis and Clark County did have a non-congregate shelter plan that they implemented close to the same time frame that we did, a different model. My understanding, and so don't quote me on this, my understanding is that they're no longer operating in that same fashion, and that they kind of pivoted and did something a little different under CARES funding, but I don't know all the details.
Ah, I gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
You bet.
That's kind of bleak. Like, we don't really have a choice, or I mean, when you're talking about contingency planning for the winter, if we're at capacity, like, what else can we do?
Well, exactly. And I mean, obviously, it's important to kind of think of that in the context of why we have a non-congregate shelter, and that we don't want individuals who are positive. That's our highest priority. Individuals who are positive, who have no place else to go, to end up in congregate settings that could infect a lot of people who are at high risk, and then summarily, overflow our hospitals. And so we're looking at alternate spaces that we can expand this operation to. And then ultimately how we begin to triage who is most important to put into non-congregate shelter.
Got it. Thanks, Adrian. Anything else? Anything else from anyone on the line here today? Okay, well, seeing none, thanks everyone for joining us today. We will see you at an admin next week, most likely. So
thanks,
have a great
everyone.
day. All right, goodbye.
Bye.